Patrick Johnson here to talk Canucks. Once again, we're at the end of another extraordinary week in this extraordinary Canucks season.
Yeah.
People have generally been saying for the last, I'd say, 4 weeks, Canucks are out of the playoffs. Like it would take a miracle for them to make it.
Yeah.
Are we still there after another pretty impressive week? At least points-wise.
I mean, it's a reminder of the mountain to climb, right? They have still 4 games in hand on them, and they're playing this weekend. Canucks technically sit 2 points back. Now, yeah, if the Canucks sweep this weekend, it's a bit of a different picture. They're obviously still essentially behind the pace, but we said all along that, going back a couple of weeks now, even the beginning of the month, that the Canucks really needed to go on a run. Like they had no more room for error. And that if they didn't, get moving really fast right now, then their chances were just going to disappear. Like literally that was going to be it. And so the fact they've won, whatever it is, 7 of 9 games, let's remember, a couple shootouts in there, an overtime win. If they hadn't gone on that run, it'd be all over. That is literally the knife's edge they're walking along. So they've got these 2 games against Montreal this weekend, and Montreal's matched up against them really well. I asked Travis Green a little bit about this morning. Like we can see how things have gone so far this year, which is that Montreal's been a lot better than them. And, he was spoken pretty generic terms, but highlighted what we all know. It's a deep team. They've got 4 solid forward lines, pretty good defense. Although it's funny, I was talking to Stu Cowan about this. You put Edmondson and Weber together, and that might be the slowest number 1 pairing in the NHL. Nonetheless, Shea Weber is still this force. Incredible shot, big tough guy, like plays great. That he does everything else but skate. And they've got Carey Price, who, if Thatcher Demko is the hottest goalie in the NHL, Carey Price basically this month is the second hottest goalie. Like he has been absolutely lights out. Even that game last week, it was interesting. I didn't necessarily, I don't see goalies, but it was one of those ones where people who observe the goalies, and there's a few of them on Twitter, they all kind of point out that Price didn't play that great, and he still got a 5-1 win. So. Maybe a bit of luck in there, but at the end of the day, Carey Price is playing great, and so we'll see what happens this weekend. I don't think a sweep. I don't think the Canucks having a sweep on the car is really in the cards, especially now with Tanner Pearson being out. Just further hammering into the depth. Jimmy Vesey, I think, is going to be maybe an interesting pickup, but he's not a guy. Like there's a reason why he's only making $900,000. Like he's a depth player. He's not a guy that's going to take over your top 6 and make a difference the way JT Miller did, for instance.
Yeah, we've been talking all along about, when we talk about goaltending, there's noise in the background. I have an anxious puppy, so that's just trying to make sure that the things don't crash.
I've got the kid. Well, I've got the kid in the background.
So I hear that. This is the home studio. This is the world we're living in. We're used to it now, right? Look, we've been talking for a long time about how, goaltending papers over the cracks, blah, blah, blah. But goaltending's part of the team. Yeah. And if you decide that you don't need to put as many resources into your blue line because your goalie is going to bail you out,
right?
Hello, the '80s Edmonton Oilers. That's acceptable. I mean, at the end of the day, all you need are wins. Let's talk about goaltending. This is the thing that's salvaging, the season for the Canucks that really got them through the playoffs last year, got them to where they were going. If they do sweep the Habs, what odds do you give them?
I mean, this is the other one. I wrote a bit about it today in my story about Thatcher Demko, just the numbers and how outstanding he's been. Like he has been, his numbers are. It's not just his raw save percentage. It's all if you dial in like Clearside Analytics, run by Steve Alcat, the former NHL goalie, which deals a lot of very goalie-specific data tracking. And our friend Kevin Woodley is a big fan of. And I messaged with Steve this week. I mean, he's so busy, he couldn't really get into himself, but I was thankful that Kevin was able to speak with me for the story because Kevin understands these numbers. And there's so much about what they're seeing in terms of how, the numbers back up what we're seeing, which is that Demko is a very smooth, steady goalie. He's playing positionally very sound. He is stopping even the tricky saves, which speaks to his, sort of positioning, the smoothness of his movements. But even that, like even, he's playing exactly how you want him to play, but even the results he's getting are kind of out of this world, because I think, the save percentage basically since the beginning of March is like 952. I wrote this so many times yesterday, I should remember it, but 952, which is just insane. Like that's just not, that's what you get on a hot streak, but it's not, it doesn't sustain itself. Like even when you're playing well, it's going to come down. So, there is some saves he's making there that perhaps are a bit of luck. And, you look at Montreal, the way they've been sort of turned the corner on the power play under Alex Burrows, like maybe there's something there. And they did do quite well, obviously, last week when they were in Vancouver. So, it comes back to how much else they're doing, because at the end of the day, like your goalie's playing great, but like there's only so much he can do. And then maybe he gets a bit lucky. And there is a bit of luck in this, I think, is part of the story as well. He is playing as well as you could hope. But he's definitely given, the Senators on what day is this? On Wednesday, I can't even remember what day we are, but on Wednesday, there were some posts involved, right? Like Demko and his posts were the story of the first period, I think, in that game, right?
Yeah, but Elias Pettersson and posts were the story in a lot of their
right. So, I mean, if contextually matters. I mean, I would say though that those posts that Demko had in his favor probably higher leverage than the posts that Pettersson hit, especially early in the season, because so many other things were going badly for the Canucks when Pettersson was really on his. I mean, he was in a run of bad luck, but like the bigger picture was rough. Whereas the Canucks, it's like Demko's playing great and he's doing everything he can, but like they're not scoring. Like if they were scoring, we wouldn't talk about those posts as much probably, but they're not scoring. And part of that's because Pettersson's out. Now, like I said, missing Tanner Pearson. And I think a little bit because, they don't actually have that much depth. I mean, every team deals with injuries. Every team runs into challenges. But, as I've said before, it's what you're able to do sort of as a Band-Aid. And there are no Band-Aids on this team. Like Jake Virtanen was bumped into the top six. He had that one game a couple of weeks ago where, he was great. Like he scored a couple fluke goals, but his presence was felt. Maybe had the game after that was useful as well. But like, where's he been? Do you know what I mean? So it's just this kind of like
fighting the Twitter warriors, Patrick. That's
I guess so. Or he's ignoring them.
One good game every 10 cuts it. So.
But that's the thing, right? And that is what it is. Like, there's no one really that you can move up this lineup that really says, it's good. It's nice that he's only on the third line, but isn't he handy to have? That's really
okay. But let me just jump in here. You talked about Vesey, and it's a low risk.
Right.
People have talked about how their depth and their bottom six is killing them versus other teams. So I have to say it's a very minor but shrewd move. What are the chances we see another move?
I think we got the deadline 3 weeks away. I think it was pretty clear. It was something, and we gave a shout out last week to Thomas Drance. Well, this week I'm going to give a shout out to one of your old friends, Daniel Wagner. But Daniel picked up on it in the Benning press conference, which was that, basically Benning said that, it was, I can't remember quite what the phrasing was, but the way he phrased it made you go, wait, when you went back and actually read and listened to what he said, he clearly tried to make a move. But, between quarantine and, who knows, what happened behind the scenes, but, quarantine obviously is a factor in all this. And so he couldn't make it happen. So, he certainly tried, I think is sort of the assumption. And we know that there was almost this Virtanen for Heinen trade. It got held up, as I understand it, based on basically Anaheim wanting the Canucks to retain some salary. The Canucks basically being like, I think at this point they were kind of like, you know what, we don't need to. Because side point, and this is my analysis, is that would be cheaper for them to buy Virtanen out in the summer, whatever, without getting too far into it. But they've obviously tried. So I think the chances are that, sure, there could be another move. They're all complicated, of course, because of, if you're bringing a player up from the States, there's a 2-week quarantine. And, it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out because, clearly the Leafs are on the hunt. All the chatter seems to be that the Leafs are on the hunt. We had, what, a month ago, Ben Kuzma said, the Oilers were interested in Brandon Sutter or thereabouts. You wonder what the Flames, Brandon, now that Daryl Sutter's, kind of had a sense of his team, does he want to make any changes? I don't know if necessarily the Flames would want to trade with the Canucks, but, I think there are some interesting possibilities out there. And I think at this point, I got to think that the Canucks are going to want to be involved. Now, the question, of course, is should Jim Benning be involved if Jim Benning's not going to necessarily be here at the end of the season? And we'll see how that shakes out. But certainly he's a guy that I think he knows his job's on the line. And, if he were to look at the standings without sort of getting into too much of the interpretation, he's going to be saying, well, we're almost in the playoffs. Maybe if we get a guy,
I think
what
that's
happened
what
last
this weekend
year.
is huge. It really is. If they happen to sweep it, maybe boldens more tweets from the owner. It just makes me laugh because we have, of course, the hashtag Thank You Jim.
Yeah.
And you may have just born another one, hashtag Jim. He certainly tried. But I just want to talk to you about Elias Pettersson. Like, this is probably the most remarkable part of this little mini run here for the Canucks is that they're doing it without their supposed best player.
Yeah.
What's the prognosis on him, and what does that hold for this team when he returns?
We don't really know. Irf Gafar kind of speculated aloud whether it was a wrist injury. When you go back and look at the clips from the Winnipeg, because Benning said something happened in the first game and then kind of aggravated in the second game. This is almost 2 weeks ago. I mean, 10 days ago. I can't remember. Where are we? 2 weeks ago now? I don't even remember. But anyway. So he's been dealing with this, for a couple weeks now, and I guess it's 2 weeks ago, isn't it? Yeah. So, 2.5 weeks, I guess. 2.5 weeks ago, he got hurt. So, if it's a wrist injury, I mean, who knows? He obviously felt well enough that he at least tried it out on the ice before the Toronto series. So, kind of, it's some kind of strain, some kind of sprain. He's not on the trip. Maybe he'll play next week. We don't know. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day,
got to be a boost to get him back.
It'll be totally be a boost because at the end of the day, like they haven't been playing very well. Like the goalie is why they've been winning. They've done just enough offensively to give themselves a chance. But let's not lose sight of how they beat Ottawa. Like they almost blew it twice against one of the worst teams in the NHL, and then got fortunate, in extra, overtime and in the shootout. And don't lose sight of that. And now they're going to play a much better team, and they're, like I said, they're short staffed on, what little depth they had on offense is now under huge pressure, and Elias Pettersson coming back makes a huge difference to their lineup because. It just means you can move guys slightly back down. Niels Höglander will be back with Bo Horvat, where he's had some success. Höglander's, I think we're finally seeing sort of the NHL catching up with Höglander, by the way. Like, he had such a great start, partly, I think, because he was already kind of in form, having played half a season already in Sweden. And readjusted. I think the league readjusted, then he readjusted, but now the league's, they're getting a better sense of him, what he's about. And it's just, it's tough.
It's always a learning curve for a rookie.
Right. Yeah. It's always a learning curve. And this is, this is going to be this is now probably just about the longest season he's ever played because most European leagues are getting into the playoffs by now. And, they run long, but they don't play as many. I guess they run longer, but they don't play as many games, if you know what I mean. So, anyway, Pettersson back just, in the end, he's your number one center. There's no replacing your number one center, no matter how well JT Miller might have played in some of those games.
Segues nicely into our last topic. Came an issue this week. You say you've got some news on goalie Mike DiPietro. Strikes me about this circumstance, Patrick, is when you talk about like the general manager and there's asset management, right? Like I don't want to get into the thank you Jim / Fire Benning conversation. Right. That's ridiculously dominated social media. Yeah. But when you look at sort of the immediate success and what's happening with Thatcher Demko, how they're navigating Pettersson's injury, to me, that's the coach. That's Travis Green. The
Sure.
bigger picture issue is how your team is constructed and what's in the pipeline. And that's, losing draft picks and prospects. Hello for nothing, Tyler Toffoli. But you had an asset that, whether people believe he's going to be a decent goalie, a great goalie, a career backup, whatever it is,
Right.
there's enough pedigree and enough name that he's an asset down the road, whether you move him, whatever you do. How
Right.
damaging is it for a goaltender to go a year without playing a game, and whose fault is that?
It's damaging for any player because at the end of the day, you practice. I mean, this as a coach, right? You practice, you set up scenarios, and then you have to apply those lessons, and you're going to make mistakes, and then you learn from the mistakes. You go, oh, okay, it's more like, there is a, sort of a guess and test element to it a little bit. And so for DiPietro, he hasn't been able to do that. He just has not been able to do anything like that. So I think there's a chance. I mean, look, Ottawa Senators have a huge goalie injury crisis right now. Matt Murray's out he's sort of week to week now. They've lost Joey Daccord, who looks like he's had a serious knee injury. They're already down Anton Forsberg. There's all these, anyway, they've got a bunch of guys that are going to be out. And they've been forced to basically play some junior amateur tryout signings with the Belleville Senators. Anyway, I was kind of working through this. Mike DiPietro has been with the Canucks, obviously, as a part of the taxi squad. You have to have 3 goalies between your taxi squad and your initial roster. He's in Ontario. He will have to be with the Canucks. They're in Quebec. He'll have to be with the Canucks Friday, Saturday, as the emergency backup option. But I think there is a scenario, and we'll see if this plays out, but I think there is a scenario where he could end up getting loaned to Belleville on Sunday. Belleville Senators have 3 games next week: Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. And meanwhile, Artur Silovs, who the Canucks essentially has as their number 4, who Ian Clark really likes, was very involved in his drafting in 2019. The young Latvian kid. He's been on loan with Manitoba Moose. Has only played once. Basically, the deal is the Jets did the Canucks a favor, but they said the guy that we have, we want him to play. Silovs is not going to play. Silovs played a bunch in Latvia in the fall, so he's played some games. Silovs, as I understand it, could get on the plane with the Jets on Sunday to fly west and do what they call the bubble-to-bubble transfer, which has become such a topic this week because Jimmy Vesey, of course, did this by being able to drive from Toronto to Ottawa in less than 5 hours. Anyway, if you take a plane, and my understanding is because, of course, he's essentially part of the Jets bubble because he's playing for their AHL team, he can fly west, and then he can conceivably join the Canucks taxi squad and become the number 3 guy for a little while. Anyway, this is how nuts the season is, and it shouldn't be the solution.
All these loan moves, Patrick, what kind of kit are they wearing?
I know, right?
Well, these fixtures allow them to move up the table.
Yeah. At the end of the day, though, the point is that it shouldn't be this crazy. There was a conscious choice not made not to sign a veteran. They could have signed a veteran goalie in the offseason for 7. There's Buffalo signed a guy today. There aren't a lot of guys around. It's obviously challenging in this season, but they could have come into the season with someone on a really low wage, put him on the taxi squad, sent DiPietro to Utica, give him a whole season of games, just let him play. But instead, they did this kind of they did the cheap version, and he's going to be a year behind where he should be as a result. And I mean, it goes back to not even being able to find him games in Europe. Like, how did Mike DiPietro not get loaned to a team in Europe? Like, he is one of the best young goalies around, and instead he just sat here. And it sort of speaks to the overall philosophy of the organization, which has been, let's just do the least we can. And it's a top-down philosophy. Let's do the least we can to survive this season, and maybe we'll shake out lucky. And you just in the end, hope is not a plan, hope is not a strategy. And if fans deserve better. Fans deserve a team that wants to be great, not a team that just kind of wants to maybe get lucky.
You're just spitting out the Canucks hashtags here, like hope is not a plan, or certainly we tried, or let's do the bare minimum.
How about this one? Luck is in our nature.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's right up there with We Are All Canucks. So, I will leave you with another haiku. As they face the Montreal Canadiens twice, I think this is going to be a very telling weekend for the Canucks, and will shape our conversation for next week. But Toffoli is red. They couldn't sign him. They ran out of time. Thank you, Jim.
Jeez Louise.
Thanks, Patrick.
See you, Paul.